Hello everyone, my name is Zachary Coop. Please consider to subscribe and check out my channel. I produce regular videos on breath, mind-body practices from Qigong to yoga, producing every week. Today we're going to talk about a breath form that will help to make your orgasms better, will make your sex life better, and will help you to become multi-orgasmic and to orgasm without touching yourself. Yes, that takes practice. So the basic breath form, what we'll need to know is the second bandha, Uddiyana bandha. So this is an energetic hold in our diaphragm. And we'll also need to know Mula bandha, which is our lowest bandha. So in Mula bandha, we pull up on our perineum in our pelvic floor and we seal a container. Think of your body as a container for the breath or the prana to move up within. Mula bandha is an energetic holding in of the lower diaphragm solar plexus, which helps to build the container in this localized region. So the third bandha is where we do a throat choke, but with these two bandhas, there's a sense of containment and energetic sealing, like a lock. That's why they're called the locks. So when you do this, you can get a sense of building the breath also in these local regions. So for example, I'll do 3 breaths and I'll build my breath within this region. And get a sense for doing that on your own. One of the ways we can do this is we can actually pull the diaphragm down and up. The lower 3 chakras are down here, and this is also known as the lower dantian in Qigong. What we can do here, we think of this as our pump. This is where we build a lot of fire. This is where we build a lot of breath energy that we can utilize to access higher brain states. We don't just want to lift the breath up and get to the higher brain states without having a level of grounding down here. I won't get into why that is in this video, but this is our main pump. And we want to get really good at working the musculature of the abdomen and the inner muscles that help with the visceral movements. And this is going to allow us to work with the lower energies. So the energy that we're going to speak about for this video is the sexual energy that comes from the sex organs. So the mastery and refinement of this breath comes when we can learn to locally contract our sex organs. So being a male, I'm touching upon the very tip of the shaft, like the very tip of the penis, and I'm starting there with my awareness at its most sensitive without even touching it, or I can utilize a practice where I touch and stimulate. But this is learning with my mind to activate my cells. So this is possible anywhere in the body. We build a mind-body connection through routine practice, and the neuroplastic changes happen so that we rewire our brain for better conscious control over our physical system. So what one can learn is to then take the energy and the activation from localized groups of cells and send that through the nervous system, which is a signal. It helps to send signals throughout the body mind and into the conscious mind. So what I'm essentially doing for the technique is I'm pulling in a very precise way the very parts of my penis that are most sensitive, or anywhere in my sex organs, including my testicles and my anus, and I'm pulling in those and contracting them, because what sex is contraction and release. I'm contracting them in alignment with my solar plexus or Uddiyana bandha being pulled in. So these two are being pulled in on the inhale. So there's a contraction of them on the inhale and a pulling in, and the energy and the breath energy is going to move into these cells, and they're going to have a better mind-body connection that's going to build. As I release, I relax. Contract, relax, over a time, if this is done properly, you'll begin to build that sense of contraction and release, and it may even become quite pleasurable, even without touching yourself. Your sex hormones are going to continue to, well, they're going to awaken. It's kind of like all of your hormonal gland centers, if you stimulate them, especially through the breath, but also through massage and touch, they begin to have activity. This is true for all of your hormonal gland centers, and there's 7 major ones. But testicles for men and the penis have some of the most sensitive gland centers, and it's very obvious when you touch them, activity starts. This is learning to do that on a more subtle energetic level by utilizing the breath instead of the gross movements of the physical body. When one learns to enter into their body on the subtle layer that the breath can access, they're accessing it at the level of their energy body or nervous system, which is a much more refined way of feeling much more refined states of pleasure. So we can think of pleasure in the physical body as being the grossest or the most object, whereas the more subtle sensations and subtle states of pleasure, and there are countless states of pleasure and refined states of them, come from that more acute way of accessing our body internally through our nervous system, through the nerves that enter, and the relationship of how to work with that energy, bringing it up the spine, especially towards the higher brain states. So the second part of this technique is once that energy has built, so you've been doing the contract release successfully, is then being able to pull that energy up the spine and into the brain. So for this, you're pulling the Uddiyana Bandha solar plexus up and in, you're pulling the stomach in, and then you're pulling everything up. You can think of it pulling energy up the spinal cord, which is a hollow tube. You may want to visualize spiraling light, spiraling energy. And once you've done that enough and practiced with it enough, the energy is going to flow because you've built an energetic channel, and this will become much more available to you to do without needing to touch yourself, and being able to circulate the sexual energy that you cultivated into higher brain states to release orgasm and ecstasy into the higher brain states, which means full body orgasm, which differentiates it from the energy and activity that is localized to the genitals being received and felt in the second chakra, first chakra, and it's a genital orgasm, it's genital pleasure. Whereas if you move the energy up your spinal column, that energy pleasure, that hormone release, the energy from the sex centers can move towards the heart, and you may have an outpouring of emotion and love, or creativity when it gets to the higher creative brain center, higher creative center of the throat, or when it gets into the brain, we get higher brain states where you may even connect with mystical experiences and experience wonderful things. So that's a lot of words. I'm going to go back to the technique. Inhale, contraction of the sex organs, anus pulling into the perineum, pulling in, or even just squeezing of Uddiyana Bandha, so the upper ab perhaps even, and the diaphragm, the whole solar plexus. If I'm doing this, I like to intuitively give a stroke for a male, is that pumping action, so my ass is pulling in the way that I would when I would make love. So we're basically utilizing the movements that are natural to lovemaking in our personal pleasure practice and refining them on our own, so that when we do want to make love, that we're fully practiced in our level of self-pleasure. And this involves how we can learn to pleasure ourselves, which in turn pleasures our partner, because the more satisfied we are in the sex act, the more that we can offer our pleasure and have a level of, I'm full, I'm so full of pleasure, I want to give everything that I am to you in your body and devote myself to you at this sacred and sexual union. And from that, there was another piece I wanted to share. So what we're also doing is we're clearing pathways in the body. And many of the neurological pathways in the nervous system or the energy body have blockages within them that prevent us from feeling pleasure in every cell of our body. So for example, the pleasure center, which is the genital center, there's blissful centers and there's pleasure centers, which are different. The pleasure center in its nervous system may not be hooked up to all the other centers of the spinal cord for your own conscious using until you've wired them to be so. So this is sexual tantric yoga. This is learning to work with pleasure and utilize it in a way where we can feel it in our whole bodies. Especially when it's detached even from the sex act, it becomes something truly beautiful because we receive everything that we once sought in sex without even having sex, so that we no longer seek sex out in the world as we once did. When we're completely satisfied sexually without even having sex, then we can operate on a whole new level of activating our higher dream and goals in life, because we're no longer seeking a lower pleasure. Not to say we can't have sex, but we're no longer driven by it with desire or pulled towards it in our life because it doesn't hold as much sway and value. And when we offer our sex, we will more so be ready to offer it with love, and we'll be looking for more because we're fully received in pleasure. And we evolve the sex act and our entering into it, and it evolves many aspects of our being because we move beyond those base urges, or we transcend them or transmute them, depending how we want to speak to it, into something that is beautiful, and it doesn't involve a level of avoidance of them. We work through them and with them. So then one can choose to have sex or not have sex and be completely satisfied. The last piece is we learn to open the nervous system with practice. So one of the things to look out for in your own practice and while you're having sex is your degree of vocalization and holding. So many of our subconscious patterns will come up during sex. And if you're privy to them, you can read a person really well when you start making love to them, and all their basic subconscious or energetic centers are going to give much information as to where they're holding. Now, I want to give an intro to the breath and vocalization, especially during sex. When someone does not vocalize, there's typically a hold happening, because the highest expression of the orgasm in the sex act, as I've experienced it, comes with a based on the tone and what's being open, the vocalization is going to come out different. So you can read someone's vocalization and moan, and depending on certain areas when you open and access them, that's going to change. So as a personal practice, I've done orgasm breath in another video, but I'll touch on it again briefly, is we start off orgasming with a deep grunting noise from the low sex centers. This is like our animal nature that we get into. And then we lift the orgasm up into the higher centers by raising its tone. Our body is like harmonic. So based on our reverberation, the vibration attunes different centers, and hormones and glands will release, which change consciousness. So when we start low, we have a full channel, and the more that we're practiced and opening this up, it's like we're just priming our body for full body pleasure. It's the same way I teach in Tantra of laughing. There's ways we can open up our body so that when we laugh, it's full body. The whole stomach is moving, the solar plexus, the abs, the heart, the throat, and then we can fully receive joy because we've primed our nervous system to be open to it. So another point of access is notice how you laugh. Are you holding back in your laugh? Is it a full expression? Sadhguru is a wonderful laugher. Children and babies are a wonderful laugher because they're fully laughing. I'm sure you know somebody who laughs really well and they're fully there. So that's something that can be practiced. As with the orgasm, in the expression of the orgasm, when you learn to fully express your orgasm, you'll more fully receive the pleasure throughout the whole body. So that was quite a bit of information. Let's touch on it, revise what we've done so far. For the breath that I was teaching, inhale, contract the sex centers, maybe a little pulse, and the solar plexus, build up some energy. Once that's built, lift it up the spine. Second one is work with your voice, even without pleasuring yourself. Once again, simply pulsating your genitals. And just sense and feel if there's any blockages or holdings, and if you can push into them. If you feel it in the solar plexus, begin to work with that energy until it opens up. Your love life, your pleasure life will change. And it will change in a way, as I said, that pleasure need not come from sex. Pleasure will be a part of your being. You will not need sex to have the pleasure, and then life can be pleasurable. Food can be pleasurable in the same way that sex was pleasurable. And you will be a radiant human on that level because you'll be so open to pleasure that people will love to be in your presence because you receive things so well. So that would be my greatest prayer for you, to have a level and access to this. So it's not just me talking a bunch of things about how you can orgasm without touching yourself, that you will have some intimate experience with the words that I am speaking. So I thank you for listening. If you want more information on this, and who wouldn't, because everyone should have this capacity, please continue to follow these videos. I do one-on-one coaching and teach breathwork, tantra, and many of these things. So thank you again for watching. Have an excellent day, full of pleasure in every way.